So imagine you spend maybe 5 years pouring every ounce of your energy, your savings, all your weekends into meticulously restoring this 1800s historic farmhouse.
Oh man, every single weekend just completely booked up with projects.
Right, exactly.
Mm.
And you fix the crumbling foundation, you replace the rotting timber, you painstakingly match the original masonry, so the outside looks like absolute perfection, right? Like it belongs on a magazine cover.
The curb appeal is basically a 10 out of 10.
Yeah. But then, you finally move in, you sit down at this gorgeous handcrafted reclaimed wood dining table and, well, the family sitting around it is completely falling apart.
Oh wow, that is a jarring image.
It really is. No one is speaking. There's all this unspoken resentment, maybe imminent divorce. The house is saved, but the home itself is just in absolute ruins.
The contrast there between the external structural perfection and that internal human devastation is just, it gives you a sinking feeling.
And that profound disconnect, that's exactly the situation we are stepping into today in Nehemiah chapter 9. Because the walls of Jerusalem have finally been rebuilt.
Decades of sitting in rubble, and now it's done.
Yeah, the gates are hung, the stonework is finished, but the community living inside those walls is deeply, deeply fractured.
So the structural project is over, but the spiritual reality is a total mess.
Exactly. And today we are pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources to explore how they handled that mess. We're looking at Pastor Florin's full message from Agape Community Church.
Right, that's week 10 of their series, The Calling, Rise and Rebuild, Moving from Rubble to Renewal.
Yep, specifically his message titled, Healing Starts with Truth-Telling. We also have his extensive sermon research notes, some incredible historical context data, and Agape's own strategic community assessment.
Which I have to say is a brilliant combination. You rarely get to look at ancient biblical history and a modern community demographic report in the same breath.
Right. We're going to bridge that gap today. Our mission is to give you, the listener, a shortcut to being deeply well-informed and to extract these nuggets of insight so you can explore what it means to apprentice under Jesus in real life.
But before we really get moving, we want to invite you to grab a Bible or, pull up an app and just read Nehemiah chapter 9.
Yeah, you can even pause this audio right now and just soak in the text first. We'll be referencing the NIV today, but whatever version you have is totally fine.
And we should probably mention how this conversation fits into the broader picture, right? This audio deep dive is just one piece of a three-part approach to the Sunday message.
Exactly. So first, there is the live Sunday sermon, which is shaped for the gathered church and pastoral person-to-person ministry.
Right, the in-the-room experience.
Yeah. Second, there's the fuller midweek video teaching on the Agape YouTube channel, which allows you more time to slow down, take notes, and go deeper.
And then third, there is this deep dive and your apprenticeship works, where we actually process the message in community and figure out how to apply it in everyday obedience.
Preached for the room, explored for depth, and discussed for apprenticeship. And as a quick note, for full transparency, the development of this audio was assisted by AI and fully reviewed by Pastor Florin.
Okay, so let's unpack that historic house metaphor you started with, because it isn't just a clever opener. It deeply mirrors Agape Church's actual physical reality right now.
It really does. Agape is this relationally driven church located in a beautiful, historic building in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a building that was literally saved from being torn down.
But Pastor's notes make it very clear that the restored building isn't the mission. Nehemiah 9 proves that.
Right, the building is just a tool. It's a witness-bearing place. The true goal is restoring the people.
Which feels incredibly urgent when you look at Agape's strategic community assessment.
Oh man, the data for the Milwaukee and Waukesha areas reveals some immense hidden pressures.
Yeah, what stood out to you from that report?
Behind closed doors, there is severe caregiver strain. Like people are just burning out trying to take care of aging parents or sick family members. Plus, there is widespread social isolation.
Right, people are more disconnected than ever.
And we're seeing real mental fragility among the youth and just a general pervasive spiritual confusion everywhere.
And you cannot fix any of that by just, putting a fresh coat of paint on a church lobby. Healing those deeply human issues has to start with truth-telling.
Yes. And truth-telling is exactly what we see happening in Nehemiah 9. But, the posture of the people here is wildly countercultural to how we handle things today.
Oh, completely. The text says the people gather in sackcloth, they are fasting, they literally put dust on their heads to mourn.
Just a total physical display of grief.
Right. And then They stand and listen to the book of the law being read for a quarter of the day. That's about 3 hours.
Which is wild.
And then they spend another quarter of the day, another 3 hours, in active confession and worship.
I read that and immediately felt so convicted about my own attention span. I mean, in our modern culture, if we feel anxious or guilty, we just want a 5-minute self-help hack to feel better.
Right, a quick meditation app to hack our nervous system back to baseline.
Exactly. But here, they are standing for hours. It's like undergoing deep, agonizing physical therapy for your soul rather than just popping a spiritual painkiller.
The physical therapy analogy works perfectly because physical therapy forces you to locate the exact source of the pain, no matter how much it hurts to press on it.
Yeah, you have to face it.
But what is truly fascinating here is the grammar of their confession during this marathon session. There's this research from Dr. Vincent K.H. Oy that highlights a really strange pattern.
Okay, I love when we get into the language stuff. What did he find?
Throughout this massive public confession of Israel's terrible historical sins, God is actually the primary subject of the verbs.
Wait, I'm genuinely confused by that.
Yeah, the text repeatedly says, you made, you chose, you rescued, you gave.
But if I stand up to confess that I messed up, my grammar should be focused on me, right? Like, I broke this, I failed here. Why are they spending hours confessing their sins by talking about what God did?
Because if you just stare at your own failures for 6 hours, what happens? You spiral, you just collapse into shame and despair.
Oh, that makes sense.
This dynamic actually answers one of our 5 foundational Bible study questions. What does this passage say about God? His character, his actions?
Oh, right.
The grammatical structure here reveals a God whose relentless faithfulness holds the entire story together, preventing them from just spiraling into shame.
So by making God the primary actor in the sentence, they are basically creating a safety net for their own vulnerability.
Exactly. They can only face the massive, terrifying reality of their failures because they're firmly anchored to the even more massive reality of God's faithfulness. He is the active rescuer.
And they are just the passive recipients of grace who kept wandering off. That is so profound. You can only be ruthlessly honest about the rubble in your life if you know the person you are confessing to won't abandon you.
That's the heart of it, yeah.
But as I was reading through the chapter, I hit Nehemiah 9, verse 2, and I have to admit, it made me cringe a little bit.
It's definitely a jarring verse for a modern reader.
Let me just read it from the NIV real quick. Those of Israelite descent had separated themselves from all foreigners. They stood in their places and confessed their sins and the sins of their ancestors.
Yeah, let's unpack that.
Because to a 21st century ear, separating from all foreigners sounds a lot like exclusion. It sounds like ethnic superiority or some dangerous political purity movement.
It definitely does.
So how in the world do we understand this without taking sides in modern political debates? I don't want to endure xenophobia.
We really have to completely detach ourselves from modern political frameworks to understand this. We're relying on historical and cultural research from scholars like Catherine E. Southwood and KPK Lay to reconstruct the ancient Near Eastern context here.
Okay, so what was actually going on?
First, this community in Jerusalem was not a powerful, dominant nation-state. They were a deeply traumatized, hyper-vulnerable remnant living under the thumb of the massive Persian Empire.
Oh, I see. So they aren't the big kids on the playground keeping others out. They're the marginalized group terrified of losing their identity entirely.
Yes, exactly. For them, assimilation wasn't about multiculturalism. It was an existential threat to their survival as a distinct people. But the second, and probably more important piece, is theological.
What's the theological angle?
To understand the separation, you have to understand the worldview of the Tower of Babel, which scholar Michael Heiser has written about extensively regarding Deuteronomy 32.
Okay, take us back to Babel. How does a story from Genesis explain the walls of Jerusalem centuries later?
At Babel, humanity collectively rebelled against God's order. The theological framework suggests that as a result, God scattered the nations and allotted them to the governance of lesser divine beings.
Like the heavenly host.
Right, who eventually became corrupt and demanded worship as the gods of the surrounding nations. But God didn't just walk away from humanity.
He called Abraham, right?
Yes. Immediately after Babel, he called one man, Abraham, to create Israel. But he created Israel for the sake of blessing the nations.
And the purpose of Israel wasn't just to be God's exclusive favorite club.
Far from it. They were created specifically to be the rescue plan for all those scattered nations. They were supposed to bear witness to the one true God and eventually bring the nations back.
Oh, man. So Israel was supposed to be like a rescue boat, but instead of pulling people out of the water, they kept drilling holes in their own hull to be more like the drowning culture around them.
That is a fantastic way to picture it. They completely lost their distinctiveness. They started worshiping the gods of the surrounding empires.
So in Nehemiah 9 says they separated themselves from foreigners.
They aren't doing it out of contempt for outsiders. They are radically acknowledging their unique covenant calling and, more painfully, their unique covenant failure.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. They aren't separating to say, hey, we are better than you. They are separating to stop the blame game.
Yes, exactly.
They are saying, we can't blame Babylonian cruelty for our problems. We can't blame Persian taxes. We are the ones God called, and we are the ones who failed.
It is the ultimate taking of responsibility. And when you strip away the ability to point fingers at outsiders, you are forced to take a hard, unfiltered look at your own history.
Which actually triggers another really fascinating shift in the text, right?
It does. Researcher P.M. Venter highlights this grammatical shift. For the vast majority of this long, sweeping historical prayer, the Israelites speak in the third person about their ancestors.
Like they were stiff-necked, they rebelled, that kind of thing.
Exactly, which is the easiest thing in the world to do.
Oh, for sure. It is so easy to blame our parents' generation, the culture, or just people these days. It's very safe to judge them.
But at the very end of the prayer, right around verse 33, the buffer just vanishes. The pronouns shift painfully to the first person plural. They finally say, we acted wickedly.
Wow.
And in verse 36, we are slaves today.
That is agonizing, to look in the mirror and say, I can't just blame history anymore. We are the problem.
Yeah.
But that raises a huge question.
What's that?
Once you arrive at that crushing realization, what do you actually do with it? Because if I figure out I'm the villain of my own story, my instinct is to either run away or just hate myself.
And this is where we bring in the interdisciplinary research on restorative justice from Howard Zehr. Modern restorative justice says that just feeling bad or words aren't enough.
Right, a simple I'm sorry doesn't fix it.
Exactly. Harm creates obligations. To truly repent, you have to name the harm, understand its impact, and actively engage in repairing it.
So confession isn't just an emotional release valve. It's a work order.
Yes. And we see this mechanically play out in the text. Nehemiah 9 doesn't end with people just crying and feeling bad. It moves right into verse 38.
Let me read that. The NIV says, in view of all this, we are making a binding agreement, putting it in a writing.
They literally sign a contract. And if you turn the page to Nehemiah 10, their confession becomes changed rhythms.
Touching their money, their Sabbath, how they worship.
Right, and how they care for the vulnerable. The internal repentance becomes an external way of life.
Which brings us to a few more of those foundational Bible study questions, specifically the middle three.
Let's run through them.
First, what does this passage reveal about humanity? Our condition, our calling, or our struggles?
Looking at this sweep of history, it reveals that our condition is incredibly prone to drift and forgetfulness.
Right.
We see Israel repeat this cycle over and over.
God rescues them, they get comfortable, they rebel, everything falls apart.
And God rescues them again. Yet, despite that drift, we are still called to bear witness to the nations.
Okay, so then question 3. What does this passage say that I need to believe, obey, or turn away from?
Well, I think we desperately need to turn away from hiding behind edited, defensive versions of our own story.
Oh, totally. We need to obey the call to truthful, restorative accountability. Stop pointing fingers.
But doing that is terrifying, which is why question 4 is so important. Is there a promise, warning, or example I need to hold on to?
Because we need a promise to have the courage to do this truth-telling.
The promise is right in Nehemiah 9, verse 17. But you are a forgiving God, gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love. That's the promise that makes truth-telling safe.
That connects so deeply to the broader vision at Agape Church. Because following Jesus isn't just an intellectual exercise where you agree with some facts. It's an active apprenticeship.
It requires real practice.
Right. Confession isn't just a crisis response when your life is on fire. It has to be a regular rhythm of your apprenticeship.
And we see this kingdom dimension of discipleship clearly in Matthew 6, verse 73. Jesus tells us to seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness.
When you follow Jesus, you are adopted into a new family, a new nation.
And kingdoms aren't just ideas. They have a real identity, a heritage, and a culture. So if we are seeking first his kingdom, Our daily rhythms, like those in Nehemiah 10, have to be built on that priority.
Everything we think, say, and do has to reflect the culture of the kingdom of God, not just the culture around us. It is a beautiful vision.
It really is.
But I mean, I have to bring up the elephant in the room regarding the book of Nehemiah. As beautiful as chapters 9 and 10 are,
I know where you're going with this.
I want a Hollywood ending. I want them to sign the document, the credits roll, and everyone lives happily ever after. But if you keep reading to chapter 13, the whole thing just completely collapses.
It is a profound tragedy. By the end of the book, the people have broken the covenant again. They are buying and selling on the Sabbath, neglecting the temple. The leadership is corrupt.
Why on earth is that in the Bible? It feels so defeating. They had the tearful confession, the awareness, the contract, and it still wasn't enough.
Because the Bible is incredibly realistic about human nature. The canonical theology here teaches us about the absolute limits of a written contract.
External recommitment, even when sincere, just can't permanently heal the human heart.
Exactly. The wall is built, the scroll is read, the contract is signed, but the internal condition of the people hasn't changed. The heart still needs resurrection.
So the Old Testament intentionally leaves us with this unfinished ache. It diagnoses the disease perfectly, but admits the cure hasn't arrived yet.
Yes, and that creates a profound longing for the new covenant promised in Jeremiah and Ezekiel, a law written on the human heart, not just on parchment.
Which brings us directly to Jesus. Jesus is the true fulfillment of everything Nehemiah 9 was reaching for.
Where Israel historically failed, Jesus is the faithful Israelite who perfectly obeys. He is the true mediator.
It's amazing. Nehemiah 9 beautifully exposes the sin, but Christ actually bears the sin.
And think back to that separation we discussed. Nehemiah 9 separates from the nations to confess. But Christ sheds his blood to do the impossible. He gathers the nations together into one new family.
Wow. It's just an incredible trajectory. The law points out the rubble in the living room, but Jesus is the master carpenter who resurrects the house from the inside out.
The wall was the project, but the people were always the purpose.
I love that. Well, we want to genuinely thank you, the listener, for making the time to join us today. Exploring these deep historical and theological waters isn't always easy.
But you are a vital part of this learning community, and we deeply value you engaging with this alongside us.
Absolutely. And if you are looking for more tools for the journey, whether you're wrestling with doubts, new to the faith, or a longtime follower of Jesus, you can always visit www.agapechurch.life.
And as you move from this audio into your apprenticeship groups, or even just into reflection on your own, we want to leave you with the final foundational Bible study question.
Right. Question 5. Who can I talk with or pray for in light of what I've learned today?
Think back to that historic farmhouse we talked about at the very beginning.
The beautiful outside, but the broken inside. If healing truly starts with truth-telling, what is one area of rubble in your own life that you've been putting a fresh coat of paint over instead of actually confessing?
And who is one trusted, safe person in your apprenticeship group that you can share that truth with this week?
Don't let the rubble just sit there. Bring it into the light.